Hey guys, this is Gene Jensen, and today I'm going to show you how to turn your soft plastics into really cool things like this sexy Super Fluke. First of all, warning, this is about one of my sponsors. Matter of fact, it's about one of my, well, the oldest sponsor that I have, JJs Magic. So any of you guys who get offended that I talk about my sponsors, go ahead and step away from this video. Step far away from this video, because this is everything that I know about JJs Magic. I'm going to go through several different soft plastics, and I'm going to talk about all the good things and the bad things about this amazing stinky dye. Alright, so first of all, let's go over what JJs Magic is. JJs Magic is a garlic scented dipping dye, and it dyes your soft plastics. I'm also going to show how it dyes skirts like Jig Skirts and spinnerbait skirts and things like that. I'm going to talk about the good things and the bad things about it. And it's just a really, really strong garlic scent. It's the strongest garlic scent on the market that I have found. Literally, I don't bring this into my house. It's just amazing how strong it is. And we'll go over that here in just a second. It comes in 5 colors. Actually, 4 colors and a clear. Clear is, as you can see, this one's almost empty. But clear is the one I use the most because I do several things with it. I take an eyedropper, which I have right here in my box. Sorry. I got an eyedropper I put in the clear, and I put 4, 5, or 6 drops in a bag of soft plastics that I'm going to be using the next day. I don't always do that. Sometimes I do it while I'm on the boat and they're just crushing this bait, and I don't want to take the time to dip it in clear all the time. I'll pull, or dip each individual one in clear. I'll pull the dropper out and I'll drop some drops in there. It comes in blood red, methylate, which is a pink, and we'll show you some really cool things you can do with that. Chartreuse, which is my most, the color I use the most. And then blue, which can accent all kinds of cool stuff. We're going to be using that a little bit today. So those are the 5 colors. You can get them at Tackle Warehouse. I'll put the link down in the description like I always do with all the stuff I use. All right, so the first thing I want to go over are all the advantages and disadvantages to JJ's Magic over all the other dyes that are on the market. First of all, it dyes all the way through. That color goes all the way through the plastic. What that means to you is that it lasts a lot longer. That color will last all day long. You don't have to keep re-dipping it during the day. It also makes the scent last a whole lot longer. Days, months. I've got some that are 7 years old. You still open it up, still smells like JJ's Magic. And the color has changed a little bit, but not much. Another advantage is that the base chemical is completely odorless. Other dyes on the market, they have a petroleum-based product, acetone in them, and that has an odor or a smell that the fish can smell, and it really, I've noticed that it turns them off. This one is completely odorless. It will not have a negative effect on the product, which will not cause a negative effect on your fishing. And last but definitely not least is that it does not bleed to the other plastics. Dip it in, let it dry, 10 to 15 minutes total, and then you can put it back in the bag and not have to worry about it bleeding to the other plastics. I've had to do it just a little bit if I didn't wait 10 or 15 minutes, but it's never been so much that it just caused it to be just an ugly paint job. Now the disadvantages to using JJ's Magic is, one, it is heat sensitive or temperature change sensitive. When I say that, if you leave it out on the deck of your boat, you leave it in your car or anything else like that, it pressurizes and it pushes the pressure of the bottle out through the cap. The disadvantages to JJ's Magic, and the thing that scares a lot of people, because everybody says, oh, JJ's Magic explodes. Whatever. It doesn't explode. What happens is that it is heat sensitive or temperature change sensitive. You pull it out of your box, pull it out of a cooler, pull it out of your hatch or whatever, and you expose it to a sunlight over even a short period of time, 15, 20, 30 minutes, it begins to warm up and pressurize. And if it's sitting upright, no big deal. It can pressurize all it wants, and just the gases will leak out, or the smell will leak out, really. But if you lay it on its side and it pressurizes, then that's when the bottle leaks out, and it leaks all over anything. I've got this box that I store mine in. And I'll show you this in just a second of why I stored in this, but you can see I've had accidents in this box. But because I use this box, it doesn't spill out, hasn't gone into anybody's boat, including my own. It's just really, really colorful on the inside. Nice. Anyway, that's a disadvantage to it. to it. So let's real quick go over what I do to prevent accidents on my boat or any other time I have it on my kayak or anything. Let's go over that real quick. Ooh, now you get to see my messy table and where I'm working. But the way I take care of the issues with it spilling just about anywhere is I have a couple of containers. This is a 10-cup latchable Tupperware container. I think it's made by, oh, it doesn't say, Rubbermaid or somebody. Anyway, it's a 10-cup. I have found that anything different size doesn't fit the bottles very well. So I look, basically on Amazon, it's about the only place I've been able to find it now. Walmart doesn't even carry them anymore. But make sure it's latchable, make sure it's sealable. Then I take some foam and I cut out some circles or some holes in the foam that fit the bottles. All this does is it keeps the bottles upright. When I'm in my boat, when I'm in my kayak, basically all I do is I leave the bottles inside the box, reach in, I unscrew them, do my little duty, dip them, put the lid back on. You don't have to over tighten the lid, just tighten it down, put the lid back on, and when you store it in your boat or in your kayak, just make sure it sits upright. I put it at the bottom of a hatch so it doesn't roll over, bounce around. That's how most of this color came from, is I had it and it rolls over in the boat and I don't notice it for a couple, 2 or 3 hours. That's when problems happen. So that's how I do it. I leave it in there. I'll have a paper towel or something like that in there to keep it out. Another thing is, when you do get it pressurized, when it does change temperature, which it does, I always make sure that I open the lid slowly. And it'll sound like you're cracking a can of Coke or something like that. You open it up and you'll hear the pressure come out. Make sure the bottle's not sloshing. That's when you have problems with it getting all over your hands and stuff. When you open it up, it'll start to slosh, and then that pressure kicks that stuff out as it goes in. Just be careful with it. That's all I have to say. It's not rocket science. It's not gonna, if you dye your hands with it, which I do every time I paint them like this, it comes off with soap and water. That's how I keep from spilling and causing accidents in my boat or anybody else's boat with JJ's Magic. Now, if I'm bank fishing and I have a backpack that I'm carrying, I have a smaller one that holds 3 bottles, and I'll pick the 3 colors I want to use that day, and it slides down in the pocket of my backpack, the very front pocket. And I just make sure that it stays upright during the day. No big issues, no problem. That box is a little bit harder to find. Matter of fact, I can't find it right now. I think I left it in a book bag in my friend's house, but that's what it is. So, pretty cool. All right, so let's talk about the basic ways that I use JJ's as just a simple dipping dye before I get into the artsy craftsy stuff. One of my favorite things to do is when I'm fishing grass, when I'm fishing any kind of off-colored, slightly stained water, I love to throw green pumpkin everything. So let me pull out a plasma tail worm, a green pumpkin plasma tail. And what I do is I just simply dip the tail in JJ's, in this Chartreuse JJ's Magic. It doesn't look like much outside of the water, but when you get it in the water, it glows like crazy. It's hard to do it if I don't have it in the water, but just to understand that when you throw this stuff in the water, any of these colors, what happens is that it will, the color just pops. So I use that when I'm throwing a shaky head or anything like that, and it really attracts the fish. It gets their attention in, like I said, all the way up to some stained water. Now, everybody knows that my favorite color craw is Bama craw. Mainly because I caught my personal best on it. And what it is, it's green pumpkin and orange. And love it, absolutely love it. But so many times I'm out of this color. But I always seem to have green pumpkin craws somewhere in the boat, because that is my favorite soft plastic color. I'm not going to take these out. I've got one sitting right here. So what I do to get orange, and I had to do this on Leech Lake in Minnesota one time, where I didn't have any at all, and I found that Leech Lake had a lot of grass, and the craws were all, green pumpkin and orange. And when they get orange, when they get into that grass, it seems they get more and more orange the grassier the lake. But you take the methylate, which is the pink, and you take your green pumpkin, and you dip that sucker down in there, knock it around a little bit, get most of the drops off, let it dry. And the color you get is an orange color on green pumpkin and watermelon. You'll see a lot of guys doing that. I've seen elite guys. I've seen a guy who won the Bassmasters Classic doing it. He won't mention that it's JJ's that he's doing it with, but I know it was because JJ's methylate's the only color that changes green pumpkin and watermelon to that bright orange that you want, and it looks just like the orange on a crawfish. I'll even take my Q-tips and I'll paint it up sometimes. Rarely do I worry about that though. And I caught 40 fish. Actually, how many fish did we catch today? I think I caught over 60 fish that day. 40 in the morning, and with my partner in the afternoon we caught 40 more. But that was the ticket. It had to have orange on it. Now this is a trick that I learned kind of accidentally. Everybody knows when you're going bed fishing, or a lot of people, everybody that bed fishes really, we love to use white baits, mainly so we can see them, and it's just a matter of ticking the bass off and getting them to bite while they're spawning and on beds. But a lot of times I've learned through experience that it's tough to get some of those females to really lock on and to really pay attention to your white baits. I mean, it happens so many times. So one time you say, you know what, I'm going to change something. I'm going to give that fish a target, especially if they're grabbing the tails and they're not getting the hook in their mouth. You know, they'll grab the tail of the lizard or whatever you're throwing and drop it off to the side. Well, if they're doing that, or if you're just having a trouble getting a bite, what I do is the first thing I do is I'll take my clear JJ's Magic and I'll dip it in clear on both sides before I'll put it on the hook. Let it dry for 10, 15 seconds, and then I pull out the blood red JJ's. Now, he hasn't always had this color. It was many, many years ago, me and a couple other guys finally convinced him to have this blood red, and it's been amazing ever since. But you notice I'm dipping the head of that Rage Craw in the JJ's Magic, in the red. Knock it off a little bit, get the drips off of it. Let it dry. But if you guys notice, look at that. You see that? I hope it's going to focus on you. It may not. But anyway, so it's red. It's got a red head. And then I let it dry, and then I put it on the hook. And it is one heck of a target for that female or the male. They seem to come unglued a lot more when it stinks real bad and when it's got that red head. Don't know why. It just happens. All right, so one of my favorite things to do is any white bait. Trick worms and horny toads I tend to do more than anything. I put horny toads on a buzz bait a lot, and especially on a buzz bait it works great. But also with the trick worm, when I'm throwing it weightless around grass or just up in the shallows of really, really clear water, I break out that methylate again, and you're going to see something really cool. You dip that whole worm in there, and I'm going to do all the way down to right here. I'm going to leave it in there for about 6 seconds. You guys don't need to time me. And you got this beautiful pink bubblegum worm. And I don't know what it is about a bubblegum horny toad on a buzzbait, but it's amazing. The more you let it dry, the more you dip it, the better off you are. Now another thing that seems kind of weird is I'll take a pink worm like this bubblegum trick worm, this KVD, I don't know what they call it, finesse worm. And I'll dip it in methylate. And I'm going to do it halfway just so you guys can see the difference. Let it dry off real good, and look at that. Look how much brighter pink that is. And I'm telling you, there are a lot of times that makes a difference when I'm throwing a weightless trick worm or a weightless worm into the shallows, into the grass, and I'm jerking it out like I would a jerk bait. It's one of those really, really popular fishing styles on Clark's Hill, which can get really clear when it has a lot of hydrilla, or mostly hydrilla or grass lakes where it has the grass that filters out the water and keeps it really clear. And it's amazing how pink you can get those things. All right, jig skirts and spinnerbait skirts. What I've got here is I've actually got two swim jigs. I just had them out of the package. They've got skirts on them, the colors that I want to use, so I just grabbed them to kind of show you guys. So I've got a white one, and I've got a green pumpkin and brown one. And first of all, we're going to go out so the hook is sharp. Let's go through what I do with green pumpkin. Simply the same thing that I do with a green pumpkin craw. Is I pull out that methylate, and I'll take the tip ends of part of the skirt. It doesn't have to be perfect. I kind of like to just use half or part of the skirt and not really count numbers of strands of skirt material. Dip it in halfway and pull it right back out. Now the first thing you're going to notice when you do this on your own is those the skirt will start to, oops, let's get in there. The skirt will start to curl up just like that. 15-20 seconds, and as it dries, it'll start to straighten that back out. Matter of fact, some of them are already starting to straighten out. I remember when I first started showing this to people, they would freak out. Oh, it's curly. curling, but it really doesn't curl up that much. And that is a beautiful color orange when you get it in the water. All right, so that's basically all I do with a green pumpkin or a brown colored skirt is I make sure that it's got a little bit of orange in it. I can also put a little chartreuse in it if I'm trying to mimic a bluegill. That's when I pull out my paintbrush, my Q-tips, dip it in the chartreuse, and I'll run a little bit of chartreuse through the skirt material just like that, and it'll make it chartreuse. But sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. All right, so let's get in what I do with a white skirt. Literally, I just want to make it look like a bait fish, a lot more like a bait fish. So if I wanted to do a sexy shad skirt, I would take my Q-tip, I'd take the blue, open it up, grab my Q-tip, dip it in, and the top part of that skirt, I'm going to color it with my blue Q-tip. I hope you guys see that pretty good. Let me zoom in just a little bit. All right, so I color it blue just like that. Put it over top of the towel, of course. Anyway, and then I lay the middle strands out. Pop up in my chartreuse. Dip it in there. You got to make sure your Q-tip's wet or it just doesn't paint really good. And I'll just tag some of those strands in the center, just like that. I'll flip it over, tag these a little bit better, and that's it. There we go. All right, so that's kind of what it looks like. You just want to make it look just, oops, let me get it focused right. And it helps it look just a little bit like a bait fish. All right, so I know I'm going to get asked this question. Somebody's going to ask me, can you dye hard baits with JJ's Magic? Yes, you can. I'm not going to pull one off the wall and do it, but I'm going to tell you guys exactly how to do it. Only thing I ever do is I take a white bait and I turn the very bottom of the belly, or in between the bill and the first hook, I turn that orange a lot of times. A lot of times I found out that a bass will, for some reason, will hit something that's got an orange belly, usually when they're feeding on bluegill, or if you're fishing a small pond and the main forage is bluegill. And you start with chartreuse on your Q-tip, and you dye that belly chartreuse, and then you let it dry completely. I'm talking wait 4, 5, 6 minutes, let it completely dry, because it's going to soften the outer clear coat of that crankbait. You got to let that dry, let the clear coat get hard again. Then get your methylate out, your pink, and do the same thing. Dip a clean Q-tip in it, rub it over top of it a little bit, let it dry completely, and you'll have a really cool color orange. I only do that in a pinch because it's not a pretty paint job, but it works. It totally works. All right, so let's get into some artwork real quick. Let me put these out of the way. Got my paintbrushes sitting right here. All right, I'm gonna pull out the original. This is the bait that started it all. The Zoom Fluke, not the Super Fluke, not the Super Fluke Junior. It's the Zoom Fluke. I just found a bag of them in my box. That's what they look like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one and I'm going to try to turn it into what's going to look like a baby bass fluke, okay? So the trick is, what you're going to need is you're going to need chartreuse and you're going to need blue. Yellow and blue make green. Duh. All right. Simple. Take your yellow. Always start with the lightest color first, because if you start rubbing this on blue with a chartreuse, you get blue on your Q-tip and you dip it back in the chartreuse, and it tends to turn your chartreuse an off color. So anyway, so all I'm doing is I'm taking that Q-tip, using it just like a paintbrush. Sometimes it's easier just to put it down on the table. And the thing about painting them with a Q-tip, let me move the bottles out of the way a little bit, is that your Q-tip has to be wet. It'll dry fairly quickly, just a few seconds, and you'll stop getting more and more color. But the more you rub it, the brighter that color is going to get. Then you take that blue, I'm going to let that dry a little bit. Take that blue, dip it in there, and as you rub that blue on there, you get green. Okay, do it along the side, which I forgot to do with the chartreuse, so I'm going to go against my rules. But and as you can see, it turns to a nice color green. Let's get that sucker to focus. And what I'll do is, when I get to the lake, I'll take a Sharpie and I'll put dots along the side to give it the marks of a bass. The reason I don't do it here is because Sharpie bleeds like crazy. So only put Sharpie like the black dot that you'll put on a shad bait or whatever, anything else. use that Sharpie at the water. Don't use it at home and then put it in the bag. I learned that the hard way. It'll turn the hole. It'll put spots in places you don't want on your baits. So, all right, so the next one is going to be the Sexy Shad. So the thing is that a lot of the things I do, anytime you dye with JJ's Magic, really, it all depends on what color you start with. A green pumpkin dipped in chartreuse is going to look different than a red shad dipped in chartreuse. It's, you know, it's common sense. It's your base color is the color of the soft plastic. So I start with an albino fluke. It's got a little bit of blue tint to the top of it. I want to spruce that blue up just a little bit. So I take the blue JJs, dip it in, get it good and wet, hold it down, and I just rub the top of it. Yes, rub the top of it. Feel like I'm in a cooking class. And I lay it on its side, and I do just the top of the side. Flip it over on the other side, do the same thing. This one's got some imperfections in it. Okay, Q-tip dried out. And like I said, the more you dip your Q-tip, you know, Q-tips dries out. You let the JJs dry for a few seconds on the bait, and then reapply. And the more you reapply, the brighter that color is going to be. I like to do it about 2 or 3 times. All right, so I'm going to sit there and I'll let that dry for just a second. Then take my chartreuse, roll it over on its side, dip the Q-tip in chartreuse, and then I'm just going to run a really thick line right along the side of that bait. Let it dry before I flip it. Flip it over. My towel's messy, so I'm getting junk all over it. It's going to have a red streak down the middle of it now. But the other side turned out pretty good. So that's what we got. We have a Sexy Shad Fluke, and that's how I do that. There's so many different things that you can do with JJ's Magic. One thing that people don't realize is that you can color dark color baits with it. This is black and blue. I dip it in chartreuse to give the tail a little bit different color, and it actually will change that color just a little bit. You can't notice it if I dip it here, but when you dip it and throw it in the water, it looks totally different. Try different baits. Try all kinds of things. So the biggest thing to remember with JJ's Magic is you just have to be careful with it. You just don't want to let it get too hot. You'll know it's really too hot when you start dipping your soft plastic into it and it starts to bubble a little bit. Keep it in a cooler. Store it in a hatch. Don't leave it out in the sun. Even if you have it in a case like mine, don't leave it out in the sun. I pull it out of the hatch and I dip it. And I'm in the south. It gets super hot down here. I've been down to South Florida in the summertime. As long as you keep it out of the sun and keep it cool, you're not going to have an issue with it. Don't let people scare you about JJ's Magic. I was introduced to this many years ago before YouTube even started, and it has changed the way I fish. I went from catching fish with the other product. I'm not going to say it in this video, but with the other dipping dye. And then one day I took and I compared the two. I went out and I was on a perfect dock bite. I was catching fish off the corner of every dock that was in 8 to 10 feet of water. I could call my shots. So I took 2 rods, identical line, identical baits, which were shaky heads. And I fished one with the other brand and one with JJ's Magic. And by the end of the day, JJ's had out-caught the other brand 6-1. I've tested this again and again in several different situations. I've put it in other people's hands and let them test it out. And it has always proven to be better than not having anything and better than having any other dipping dye product on the market. And that's totally promotional because I believe in this stuff. I worked for him for free for over 9 years to keep this stuff on the market, and I'm still trying to keep it on the market. So you guys check out JJ's Magic. Don't be afraid of it. Go out and whack them. Well, like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water, go out and catch some fish, and have a great day. Oh, now I'm craving Italian.